Welcome to today's interview with Jiasheng and Yiming from ZenStack. ZenStack is a development toolkit that supercharges your development workflows when working with Prisma. For example, it lets you define access control policies right in your Prisma schema or generate CRUD functions for your favorite framework. Jiasheng and Yiming have been working together for years. They actually met at Microsoft, where they worked on things like network analysis and visualization, and even built their own domain-specific language. That experience of building a domain-specific language came in handy when they were starting their work on ZenStack, because there they extended Prisma's domain-specific language, the Prisma schema language, with custom functionality like these custom access control policies. In our interview today, we talk about how they came up with the idea for ZenStack, the philosophy behind it, and the process of building it. They show us how to get started with ZenStack, how to define custom access control policies right in your Prisma schema, and then test these policies using the REPL that they built, where you can use Prisma Client to send queries to your database, but also simulate authenticated users. I was super impressed by that. But I think the part that impressed me the most were the CRUD generation capabilities that they demonstrated in the end of our interview. They showed me how you can generate CRUD functions for backend frameworks like Express, Fastify, or Next.js, but also frontend frameworks like Next, Nuxt, Remix, or Svelte. You name it, they support them all. I think I was rarely so excited about a development tool like this one, and I hope that you enjoy the interview as much as I did. Hello and welcome everybody, and especially hello to Jiasheng and Yiming from ZenStack who are joining me today. Welcome. How are you both doing?
I'm doing great. Thanks, Nicholas.
Yeah, thank you. Good to see you again.
All right, Jiasheng, we've already seen you in a previous version of What's New in Prisma that people can go and look up on our YouTube channel. So you already introduced yourself back then a little bit. So today I'm asking Yiming, what's your background, and can you just quickly introduce yourself? How did you get into software development in the first place?
Okay, cool. Yeah, thanks, Nicholas. And I am Yiming, and I'm one of the creators of ZenStack, what we will see today. And great to be here. Happy to presenting this interview. And a little bit background about myself. I'm in Seattle, in the United States. I can see the trees from the window. And also, I studied the computer science in college, and has always been working. I became a professional developer in 2005, has always been in the industry for my entire career, initially as a individual contributor, and then later as developer lead, CTO, etc. roles. So early on, my career started in Microsoft. So I spent roughly 10 years in Microsoft. So it started in the desktop age, and then graduated to client server development, and later to the cloud AI era. So
Wow.
yeah, I had lots of fun over there. And later after that, I joined a startup called named PT Mind, where we build several fairly complex SaaS products for digital marketers. So that's where we got really deeply involved into web development and got really excited about this thing here. So yeah, here we are. We started building ZenStack about a year ago. Me and Jiasheng, we've been co-worker for quite some time.
Mm-hmm. Okay, actually, I'm curious now because you've got so much experience under your belt, Yiming. What kind of technologies have you been working with as an engineer? If you've been at Microsoft, have you been working with C# and .NET, or has it always been like the web ecosystem? What kind of technologies have you worked with?
Well, of course, C# in Microsoft. We love the language. We love Anders, and yeah, we love that Anders created TypeScript later on. Yeah, so initially, lots of C# experiences, both for creating desktop applications, developer tools, test tools, and we even use C# to create a domain-specific language for modeling, system behaviors and also network
Oh,
communication,
wow.
etc. Yeah, so lots of this stuff. But after we, left Microsoft and joined startup, C# is now so much a popular choice for startups. Yeah, the open source world is we had lots of Java code and also Python code. It's really like initially like a language zoo, even with Erlang. Yeah, so lots of stuff going on. So yeah, so during that a few years, we try to consolidate our technology into sort of modernize the unified frameworks and the languages gradually to Node.js, JavaScript, and the TypeScript, etc. So yeah, put lots of effort onto it. Yeah, now I'll say that for web development, I'm fully into JavaScript, TypeScript, and these frameworks and tools.
And you already introduced yourself last time, Jiasheng, but maybe give people just a quick refresher of what your background is and how you got into software development.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, actually, yeah, also same as Yiming. Actually, I also majored in computer science in college, and then after graduation, I just joined the Microsoft, and that is where I met with Yiming. And then I think all our career is just overlapped. After the Microsoft, we both joined the PT Man company. Yeah, and maybe a different thing is that the reason actually I choose the computer science is because during the high school I know nothing about programming. Yeah, I just like playing computer games. So during that time, I think learning computer science just equals to playing computer games. That's why
Yes.
I choose computer science, and after that, it's just follow the standard process.
Yeah, I feel like it's how a lot of people get started with computer science and like software engineering. They're playing computer games and they want to figure out, okay, either how do I make this kind of game myself, or how do I maybe change things in the game, some cheat codes or something like this, which they can do. Or people want to build websites and then just start with like something like this. So yeah, it's great to hear how you both got into engineering that way. How did you first come across Prisma actually? And now I'm asking Yiming, what's your Prisma story? When did you first hear of it?
So I find it interesting that we're right now building a toolkit above Prisma, but I think we ran into Prisma fairly late. So we've been, a long time ORM user. We love ORMs initially from the Java ecosystem and also Python with SQL Alchemy. And later, when we started to do lots of work with the Node.js, we use Next.js. And that time, I think the de facto choice is still type ORM. We're okay with it. But when we work on an established product, we don't even as a CTO role, I don't have lots of freedom to replace things on the fly. But later on, we started a new smaller project. That's the ideal situation where you can try out new things to learn state of the art, right? That's when I ran into Prisma, and I think I immediately liked the way Prisma model data entities and also the flexible query syntax. Although I usually prefer code first approach, especially for example when we do GraphQL programming, I prefer code first approach. But I think Prisma's schema language and the syntax really attracted me, and I fell in love with it.
That's great. When was that? Around which year when you came across Prisma and you started using it?
I think that's around the early or mid last year, 2020.
Wow. Okay.
2022. Yeah.
Okay. So that's in
I think
peak
I got to
20.
know it a bit earlier than that, but really started with hands-on building stuff, about a year and a half ago.
I see.
Yeah.
All right, then let's talk about ZenStack a little bit. I think that's why most people tuned in here today. They want to learn about what it is, how you came up with the idea. So yeah, just introduce us to ZenStack and how you came up with the idea for it.
Okay, yeah, cool. It's great to have the opportunity to share the thoughts behind the products. So I think it's a little bit hard to precisely define ZenStack, but we like to call it a schema-first full-stack development toolkit for the JavaScript world. And of course, it's built above Prisma since we love Prisma so much. So I think it's essentially a backend toolkit that helps you build secure backend services with a lot less effort, a lot less coding. But as a full stack tool, we also put lots of consideration into the front end part, as we will see in the demo part. So I think the story started when we got our hands really deep into building SaaS applications in the Node.js world. We found the first thing is that we found lots of inefficiency between the collaboration between our backend team and the front-end team, how they collaborate, how the knowledge is disconnected, how one side may move faster than the other side. We need to coordinate things. And I think we are a believer that in the future, full stack team will be more and more the mainstream, the norm in the future. But I think especially for people coming from a front-end background, it's pretty challenging if you don't have lots of hands-on experience with like a database, authentication, authorization, API design, construction. It's fairly hard to tackle, real complex backend tasks.
Mhm.
But we still see that if we look at the complexity of backend of most applications, the main commonality are two things. One is data access, and the other is authorization, right? They spread across most of the web applications there, and they're fairly complex. And Prisma solved the first problem really well, we think. And then we started to think what we can do if we want to help simplify these things so that full stack development can become a more real world practice, right? We thought about how to do this, and the first thing we thought is that we don't want to build something like a new framework. I think the irony of the JavaScript world is that it simplified things a lot, but also complicated things a lot in other aspects, right? So it's great to have one single language for your front end, back end, but also like the framework and the tooling, they're so fragmented and so broken, right? I think I spend maybe 20% of time to just keep my tools and framework happy together. Yeah, so I think it's really hard to justify a brand new framework. And the way we want to build a new tool is like we want to build in a way that's we're not really building a new tool. So that's why we thought about, Prisma solved the data access as modeling part really well. Why don't we just build above it, right? We wrap around it, add more power, make it more powerful, so that if developers knows how to use Prisma, they know how to use us, right?
That
Of
sounds
course,
great. Like, I
yeah.
really like this approach. What you said, that you don't want to build an entirely new framework. I indeed agree that the Node.js and JavaScript ecosystem kind of suffers from this, the fact that everybody thinks they need to build the next framework that then everybody's using, and that is trumping everything that has been there before. And I think
Yeah.
this just makes it very difficult to kind of keep up, and also just has like a lot of options for people and very difficult to keep the overview. So rather build something that plugs in with the existing tools that people already use today and that they love today, and then make sure that people just are empowered with the existing tools. I really like this approach about
Exactly.
how you're building ZenStack there.
So I mean, yeah, of course there will be new concepts to learn if you pick up a new tool, right? But the goal is try to get developers to learn things in a relatively familiar environment, right? And also is we don't want to do things in a highly disruptive way.
That's great. You also mentioned that ZenStack is schema first and full stack, basically. So we'll probably talk about it in the demo or see what schema first actually means. But I wonder if you could just describe in a couple of sentences, what does it mean for ZenStack to be schema first?
So what we do about Prisma is essentially three things. One is that we added a access control layer around Prisma. We'll get to that later. That's the key pillar of the entire thing. And the other thing is that based on that, we can generate automatic, APIs and front-end hooks for doing data manipulation. And the third thing is that we want things to be like end-to-end type safety. This is like really the modern trend of a better, higher quality product. So what does it mean so Nicholas, what does it mean to be a schema first toolkit, right? So the very first layer of value that ZenStack provides is to extend the Prisma at two layers. The first layer at two aspects. The first aspect is on the schema level, right? We kind of extended Prisma schema language by adding new language features here. The most important thing are the custom attributes and the functions which we use to model the access control policies here. And then also at the runtime, we use that access policies to create a transparent proxy around a standard Prisma client and intercept the queries and the mutations, enforce these policies, and then make sure that the data access layer is already secured. So this is the very core part of the system, and yeah, the schema is the center of the entire thing. And then on the second layer, basically, since the data access layer is already secured, we can just automatically provide CRUD APIs to the outside world, to the front end. We do it in a way, as we said, we don't build new frameworks, but we integrate into existing popular ones. For example, with full stack frameworks like Next.js or backend framework like Express, you can install a API handler with a few lines of code, and then just the entire Prisma's query mutation capability is ready to be consumed as a set of APIs.
That's amazing. That just saves so much code. If I think about how much time I've spent writing CRUD routes in Express in my career as an engineer, I think it's just incredible that now I just need a few lines of code and I have all the CRUD routes already generated. So that is really amazing. Actually, I have one more question about the architecture that you showed and the ZenStack proxy. How and where does the ZenStack proxy actually run? Is this like a proxy that people need to host on their own infrastructure, or how does this actually work?
Okay, cool. Good question. So ZenStack is not a service. It's basically a toolkit plus a library. So the proxy, they run on your backend server. For example, if you're using Next.js, they run inside of your API, what's called API root handlers, right? If you're using Express.js, it runs as a Express request handler. So yeah, it really runs inside of your own application server as a library.
Mm-hmm. I see.
Yeah.
Yeah, maybe one thing I want to complement is that another thing is that you can think the proxy is literally just the proxy of JavaScript. Yeah, that's why you use exactly the same API in the current Prisma client, but under the hood, we use the JavaScript proxy to add the extra filter into that the existing functions. Maybe that's
I
easy
see.
for people to understand.
Yeah.
Yes,
It's
that
probably
clarifies it.
yeah, sorry. It's probably easier to understand here. For example, here, the way how we mount the CRUD API to a Next.js request handler is by providing a callback to provide a Prisma instance, and here we call the enhance API to wrap around the Prisma instance, and also giving it a current user context. We'll see more about this in the demo part.
Then there's another thing that I'm curious about, because what you've shown me is that you have added custom attributes to the Prisma schema.
Mm-hmm.
Was that a lot of work? Because I know that this is something, custom attributes in the Prisma schema. This is a feature request that we have open in the Prisma repository, and
Yes.
it's still open. So this is actually not a natively supported feature by Prisma. I'm curious, was it very difficult to build this? What kind of challenges did you face while you were doing this? And how did you approach it in the first place? I mean, you're extending Prisma with kind of like a custom like with a custom API. How did you do that?
Yeah, great question. So I think we made two big decisions early on. The first one is to build above Prisma, right? We're settled on that. Then the other thing is that we want to extend the power of the schema. How to do that? As you said, this is not an official feature to allow to add custom attributes. So we really struggle to think about this, and finally we decided that it's still a probably a good choice to create a new DSL first, just for adding these language features for custom attributes, but in the future, we'll probably also have much more flexibility in extending the language into other directions. Yes, the short answer is that we kind of replicated the Prisma schema language in our DSL called zmodel, make it a superset of Prisma schema language, and add things as we need. That is quite some work. But fortunately, early on in our career, Jiasheng and I, we had experience building some DSL in Microsoft, kind of familiar with the general approach. Also found a great tool in the TypeScript world called Langym for you to quickly, create a DSL and also the Visual Studio Code extension with not much effort, actually.
Super interesting. I think that this is actually another very interesting topic that we could probably talk about for hours, actually. I'm actually super curious how you built this. Maybe we save this for another stream, or if you ever have the idea to write a blog post about this, I think this would also attract a lot of developers to just learn, okay, how did you actually build ZenStack? Because I think you've faced some really hard technical challenges there. Building your own DSL in TypeScript, I think this is quite a challenge. And at least for me personally, I would be very curious to read about something like this.
Cool. Yeah, that's a very good point. We should do that.
Then let's move on and keep talking a little bit about ZenStack. So you've already shown me the access control policies, the CRUD generation capabilities. Is there anything else that you want to highlight in terms of features or capabilities of ZenStack?
Yeah, sure. The topmost layer is the front-end query hooks. So that, as I said, that as a backend toolkit, we also put lots of consideration onto the front end. We want to make it very easy to consume the CRUD APIs. So ZenStack, as we said, we extended the Prisma schema language. We also introduced a language constructor called the plugin, where user can write a custom logic to extend what the CLI does. It's close to Prisma generator, but they just consume the zmodel AST instead of the Prisma internal data structure. So yeah, we provide plugins for you to generate data query hooks, for example, targeting popular libraries like SWR or tanstack-query, so that on the front end, you also get fully type-safe, dynamic, flexible query syntax, exactly as you use Prisma in the backend.
Okay, and I think here the approach that you took initially that we already talked about of not building your own framework, but rather supercharging existing tools and frameworks, here it really pays off, right? Because now you can actually provide these generated hooks for all the different front-end frameworks and libraries that exist. And people can use the ZenStack tools regardless of what they're already using, and they don't need to adopt the new framework that you're building. So I think here it especially shines and pays off that you've taken this route instead of building an entirely new framework.
Exactly, yeah. So by default, we think about what we can integrate instead of building something new.
All right. Anything else in terms of features, or should we go and jump into a demo so that our audience can see how to use ZenStack?
Yeah, I think so. I think we've covered all the essential features from the top level, and we can jump into the demo part. So I think I'll probably present two parts of the demo. One is to demonstrate how the access policy part works and how it can turns Prisma into a secure data access layer. So let me first scaffold a simple Prisma project. And also, since I do it so many times in a day, I created a wrapper script just to illustrate what the steps for it. So I love the Prisma CLI. It makes it really easy to scaffold a new Prisma, new disposable Prisma project, right? So here I'm using the the scripting template, which is essentially just a command line program that executes some Prisma command. And after that, we'll just run the ZenStack init command to install dependencies. And also we run the ZenStack generate command, which is like similar to Prisma generate, but it just generates more things and also runs Prisma generate under the hood. And then push data and also execute the script to populate some data into the database. All cool?
That looks great. And actually, I'm using Prisma very regularly myself, and I'm also always using the TypeScript script example whenever I quickly need to reproduce an issue of a user or something like this. This is just the fastest way to very quickly spin up like a working Prisma environment and start playing around.
Yes, quick and neat. So let's do that. I'll create a project called Prisma Interview.
Yeah, that's the output from Try Prisma.
Yes, looks familiar. Now we're running the ZenStack init, installing packages.
So one question here, Prisma DB push will also run Prisma generate afterwards. You're still explicitly calling ZenStack generate before you're running Prisma DB push. I guess you haven't hooked into Prisma DB push to then execute ZenStack generate afterwards. So you still need to explicitly call it beforehand.
So the reason I run ZenStack generate at the first step is that it actually generate a schema.prisma file. Yeah, because we're kind of like a transpiler that turns the zmodel DSL into Prisma schema in the first place.
So what did the ZenStack generate command then actually generate inside of your project? Maybe you can already just like show it inside of VS Code what it looks like. I'm curious now.
Yeah, that's probably easier too. So the thing that ZenStack init, what it does besides installing dependencies is copies over the Prisma schema into schema.zmodel, our DSL, and we also implement this VS Code experience to try to make it as familiar as Prisma user had with the Prisma extension. Yeah. So by default, it's basically the same thing. If we run ZenStack generate, it basically regenerates schema.prisma file, but as a banner telling you that do not modify this. You should at this point, starting point from this point, start to use the zmodel file, and this guy will be regenerated for you each time you run generate. Does that make sense?
I see. So as a developer, I'm always working inside of the schema zmodel file, and I don't actually touch the schema.prisma. The schema.prisma now is kind of an asset, like an output of the zmodel file after running ZenStack generate.
Exactly. Yeah,
okay,
that should be
understood.
the case. Yeah. Okay, so let's start to work on this. Right now, is the zmodel is completely the same as the Prisma schema, but we can try adding some access policies. For example, for this simple blog post example, we can say that we want the user model to be readable if the reader is logged in, right? The allow attribute is the one we extended out of Prisma schema, and also it allows you to specify CRUD operations and then a Boolean expression to indicate it should be allowed or denied. And the auth built-in function is a function for you to specify your current user, and how it gets the value depends on your authentication framework. We'll come to see it in the later steps. But basically, you are checking auth not equal to null to check if user is logged in. Right. This is all good. And we add a little bit more complex rules for the post part. For example, we want to allow all operation if the auth equals to author. Okay. Yeah. So basically, the author of the post can do everything to the post or CRUD. And then we also allow everybody to read if the post is published. That makes sense? Even if the user is not logged in.
Yes.
Yeah. So this is basically a combination of RBAC with the ABAC, because it uses both the user's it's not a role, but the user identity and also the attributes on the entity itself. Okay, cool. Yeah. So here we can see how we do the generation. If I run npx ZenStack generate. Oh, sorry. Yeah. The schema Prisma file is regenerated. Well, it's essentially it's pretty much like how TSC compiles TypeScript to JavaScript. It strips down the things that Prisma doesn't understand, and also turn these access policies into comments. But that's only for reference. It doesn't really do anything. Yeah, basically it's just trim down stuff and turn into a standard Prisma schema. But it also generates some supporting modules under .ZenStack under no modules, very similar to how Prisma generated to .Prisma for helping the enforcement of access policies. Okay, the next thing we can do is to see how this thing actually works, right? So we recently added a REPL mode for people to very quickly try out queries in a command line environment. Yeah, let's do that. Yeah. So the REPL comes with the two built-in variables. One is Prisma. So we got the inspiration from a tool called, I think, Prisma Console, a community project for Prisma. And we can see you run Prisma queries here, how many users we have, and also there is also
Wow.
a table mode for prettier output. You have 2 users. We can
Beautiful.
also see how many posts we have. Yeah, have a few posts. We have 4 posts here. And it also has another variable called db. db is a enhanced Prisma that's wrapped around by ZenStack around a Prisma client.
Mhm.
So if we do db.user.find many, it's empty, right? Why it's empty? Because currently by default we're executing with anonymous user context.
Ah.
So according to our rule that the user has to is only readable when the user is logged in, right?
You need to be authenticated.
Yeah, that's right. And the REPL allows you to simulate a login just by providing a user context, like for example, is user 1. Right now we're under user 1 context. We do a find. We can see all the users because the user is logged in.
Wow.
Okay. Yeah, and also if we try to find with this db variable, find all the posts, you see 3 instead of a 4, right? Because one of them is actually unpublished.
That looks super, super nice. Let me recap a little bit in my own words what I just saw, because I think it's really amazing, like what you just showed there. So
Yeah.
effectively, inside of the ZenStack schema, the .zmodel file here, you declared some access policies. These
Yes.
access policies, they could refer, for example, to an authenticated user, and for each model, you were able to specify access policies with respect to the CRUD operations and provide some conditions as to when it should be possible to view or like create, read, update the records of that model.
Yeah.
You then ran the ZenStack generate command, which actually just stripped these access policies in the Prisma schema file and put them into comments there so that we have them for reference later.
Yes.
And then you could start using the REPL that you built into ZenStack as well to start querying the data in the database. And the cool thing is that you not only queried it with Prisma Client, but you built this wrapper around Prisma Client that you're calling DB here, where you can simulate an authenticated user. And using that authenticated user, you can now actually make use of these access policies that you've defined before and test them in a like fairly fine-grained way. I think that's a really amazing workflow that you showed there.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, exactly. The REPL is supposed to be an easy playground for you to figure out why some rules, how the rules are working, why some works, why some doesn't, and for debugging and troubleshooting.
Super neat.
Yeah. So we will also see more complex rules. For example, the condition can also not only access current fields, but also traverse relations and even a collection, a one-to-many relation in multi-level of nesting. But we will see that in a more real-world application later on.
One more thing I'm curious about is how does the user implement the auth function themselves, or like if they use like a different auth provider, how can they customize the behavior of this auth function that you're adding in the access policies here?
Yeah, great question. So ZenStack doesn't provide, we are essentially a authorization toolkit, but we don't provide authentication. And we're also agnostic to what kind of authentication solution the user use, right? You can use, for example, the simplest way. Let's say if you're using ZenStack in Express.js backend, right? You can just use a JWT to represent the user identity, and when you handle a request, you can extract and verify the JWT, extract out the user ID, and use that to provide to the enhance the Prisma client. So that's one way to do that. There's also can be a more complex solution, like for example, if you're using a third-party authentication provider like CRUD, right? CRUD provide you with APIs for accessing current user from the backend. It's probably based on JWT as well. It may even access get a current user by calling their own service, but we don't really care about that. As long as you can get the user identity, you can use it to construct a wrapper around the Prisma, and then the wrapped Prisma client is authorization enabled.
Very nice.
We'll see that how it works with the next auth in the to do sample later on.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, should we move to that example now? I think, or is there more that you want to show here about the first kind of getting started flow with ZenStack?
Not really. Well, the one thing I want to mention, probably save time not to do it here, is that the authorization works in a way that, as you see, when you are doing a read query, it silently filter out the things that you are not supposed to see, right? When you're doing a write, for example, create or update, it basically will reject the operation with an arrow, indicating that you are violating access policy. Yeah.
Okay, very, very good clarification here.
Yeah. So yeah, let's move on to the second part of the demo. Maybe very first step is to see how it works in the local environment. So this is our famous to-do application. Well, it's a fancy to-do because it's a multi-tenant to-do SaaS kind of thing. So yeah, actually Jiasheng showed the same demo probably in the last what's new in Prisma. Let's log in and see how the general experience looks like, right? So when you land in it to do, it's like every multi-tenant applications, you have a place to select which workspace, which space you want to get into, right? You can also create your new space. For example, create a Prisma interview.
Yeah. One question which I already have when you say multi-tenant, there are different levels, I think, to kind of multi-tenancy and different ways how it can be implemented. I think some people will implement it so that each tenant will even get their own database. Maybe if you're using Postgres, then each tenant will have their own schema, their own Postgres schema within a database. So on what level of multi-tenancy does your project fall here?
Good question. So we model multi-tenancy completely at the application level in the zmodel schema. So basically, a little bit later, we will see the schema file. Actually, let me do that right now. So I can interleave the demo with the code part. So this is the zmodel file for this to-do application, right? It's a little bit complicated because it has multiple tenant-related entities. The first thing is that it has a space. A space is where users collaborate, right? So you can invite other users to space. You can assign roles to the user in the space, and you can share to-do list and to-do items to other people in the space. So this is what we call like the application level of modeling of a tenant. And also here you have the space has a list of members, and the space user model is essentially the many-to-many join table between users and spaces. A user can belong to multiple spaces, and the space can have multiple users, right? Besides the join, it also has a role to indicate what kind of role the user has in such a space. And then after that, basically our other assets like to-do list. So they belong to a space, and then they also have a owner, right? And also for the to-do item as well. Yeah. So as said, the entire multi-tenancy, the segregation of data between different spaces and how data are visible or shared are completely modeled at the application model inside of the zmodel and Prisma.
Okay,
that makes sense.
That clarifies it. And indeed, your multi-tenancy then indeed is all implemented on the application layer, but they all share the same database, basically.
Exactly. Yeah, we don't use multi-databases. Well, if the user decides to do that, it's completely fine as long as they can do it in a Prisma compatible way. And also like a multi-Postgres schema, that's completely fine if they want to use the schema attribute to use different schemas for different models.
That makes sense. All right, thank you.
But that's user choice. Cool. Yeah, getting back to the demo, let's first create a space where we collaborate for this demo. And also here you can invite other people into the space and assign roles. I'll skip this part. and then you can create a to-do list. So have a fun interview. Yeah, now we have a list. And then getting into the list, we have the ability to create to-do items. So let's warm up, intro background, do a demo, wrap up. Okay. Yeah, you can manage the state of the completion. That's pretty standard stuff. And getting back to code, I think Nicholas probably can just walk through how the entire thing is wired up in the
Yeah, let's
real
do that.
stack application. Okay, cool. Yeah. So I explained a little bit about the how the schema is organized. It has a spaces, space membership, and the users, and also it has to-do list, which has a one-to-many relationship with the to-do items. And if we look at the access policies here, it's getting a little bit more complex. Yeah, that's what I said. We want to provide enough flexibility for people to really model complex authorization rules in a multi-tenant environment. For example, the to-do list is readable to a user if the user is the owner of the list, right? That makes sense? And also, if the list belongs to a space where the space members has a user that's equal to the current user, and also when the to-do list is not private. So basically, it means that any to-do list that is not private is also readable to all other users in the same space.
Wow, you can create really more complex access permission rules here than just like asking for an authenticated user. You can really combine all of them in very flexible ways. That looks pretty advanced. I really like this.
Yeah. So because we think that real applications are advanced usually, so yeah, we need to make it really usable. First thing is allow to you to like traverse the relation graph in a limited way, right? You can use the dot notation to reach deep into the related entities without any limit. And also here you see the special syntax. The space dot member is actually a one-to-many. It's a collection of related entities. We have this question mark syntax for checking if any element of this collection matches the condition inside this square bracket.
Wow.
And the inside of the square bracket is essentially like a lambda. The scope is scoped to the member entity. You're visiting the user, which is a field of the space member, and checking each individual if any one of them matches the condition.
Wow.
Yeah, you can also change it to a pound sign to require everyone matches or non-match. Non-matches.
I see.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, cool. So much about the schema. Let me get to the files. Yeah, the application is built with a standard Next.js full stack framework. We're using version 13, probably 14, but still, this demo is using the old pages root. But the concept doesn't really change much. It's basically the way how
Sure.
pages and APIs are organized. It's also using NextAuth for authentication, and we'll see how this authentication is hooked together with the authorization that ZenStack provides. The very first thing after providing the schema is to mount the CRUD APIs into a path. Here we're using /API /model /catch-all here. And this is similar to what we saw on the website. We're just basically just creating a Next.js handler that's created by the server packages of ZenStack. It provides all kinds of integration with popular frameworks. And the most important part here is when you're creating the handler, you provide a callback for fetching a Prisma client instance for each request. The callback is called whenever there's a new request. And inside the request, you decide what kind of Prisma client you return, right? So here we have a helper. If we get into that, it first thing it does is to call the API of Next.auth. It's a wrapper of Next.auth, giving it the request context. The Next.auth give you back on the server side the current session. And the session includes a user. Basically, it carries the user ID inside of it. And then we pass the user as the context for creating a proxied Prisma client and use it as the Prisma client instance that's supporting our CRUD API.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so far makes sense, right? Sure.
Yeah, to answer the previous question, Nicholas asked what's the auth function stands for.
Mm-hmm.
Here is just this enhanced function. The second parameter is exactly what the auth function looks for. Yeah, in the access
Yeah,
point.
great point.
Yes.
Yeah.
So here people can determine how they want this auth function that they use in their access policies in the schema. How they want this to work. What like how it should be implemented.
Exactly. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
You can also have a database lookup. For example, if you need more things than ID, you can look up into DB to fetch more fields and then assign it to the user context.
Mm-hmm.
And then inside of your schema, your auth function will just have more fields in it you can use in the access rules.
I see. That's great.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Cool. And with this setup, we will just automatically serve CRUD API, which is also secured on the API slash model slash dot 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 path. And then how do we consume it, right? So from the front end, as we said, the zmodel also provides a mechanism called plugin, similar to Prisma's generator. So here we've installed a plugin called the tanstack-query,
Mm-hmm.
and what it does is to generate front-end data query hooks targeting the tanstack-query library into the lib/hooks folder. And also, since tanstack-query is multi-framework, it supports React, Vue, and the Svelte. We're saying that we want to generate for React and also generate using the syntax of a tanstack-query v5. So a bunch of configurations. So the other thing, as we said, first thing ZenStack generates runs is regenerate the Prisma schema, and the next thing is also runs all the plugins. After running it, you will see that the hooks are generated here, one for each Prisma model. Yeah. For example, the code is looks a bit complicated, but using it quite straightforward. You see the parity with all Prisma functions. Like for the to-do list, you have the create hooks, mutation, you have the create many, you have the find many, you have the infinite version of find many for pagination and infinite scrolling, find unique and aggregation, etc. They're all like one-to-one mapped from the Prisma API to the front-end hooks.
Wow.
Yeah. Then how to use them, right? Let's see, for example, let's get to the UI part, where inside of a space, we have the UI for managing this part. For managing the to-do list here, right? We can check this out. So using it is fairly easy. For example, let's get to the read part first. When we're at the homepage of the space, we call this use find many list hook to fetch the current list to-do lists that are supposed to be readable by the current user. Remember that the API is fully authorized. And also here, the syntax is you have all the freedom using whatever you want to use as a Prisma call. The filters, the relation fetching, and also the order by, etc. What's cool is that the result returned is also dynamic. I like Prisma's feature so much that when you include relation, you basically have it's fully typed, including that field here. That's what's also here. We have the owner field in the typing of the result. So with this, you can just use it to render the list here as a React component, as you always do. This is for the reading part. And also for the mutation part, for example, when you are creating a to-do list, you basically just fetch a mutation hook and then call call the hook to do a mutation with the data as you do in Prisma call, right? Yeah, so connecting to relations and also setting fields, etc. So it's exactly as the same experience as you use Prisma in the backend.
That's super convenient.
Yeah, cool. And also, we also try to make it really as easy as possible. For example, in the code, there's no place you need to revalidate or refetch a query after a mutation happens. For example, when you create a to-do list, it just show up here because under the hood, the hooks, the generated hooks, understand which kind of mutation actually impact or potentially impact which kind of query, and invalidate that query automatically for you. So that's why right away after creating the find many list query are automatically refreshed, and the data shows up here.
Well, it's really incredible to think about how far the React ecosystem has come. If I compare this with kind of the early days when we were using Redux and updating kind of the state ourselves all the time, making sure that we update the proper UI components. I mean, here, like everything just like works magically. Basically, we just kind of generate these hooks, we plug them into our components, and everything works in the way that it should, without me needing to spend any cognitive cycles on state management, updating the UI. That's incredible. I really love it.
Yeah, we just really wanted to carry over the excellency of data access all the way from the backend to the front end. Yeah. So another thing that's probably even cooler, let me try it. It's a very new feature. So if I toggle the network into a slower mode, you will see how the optimistic update works. For example, create a to-do. It immediately shows up with a spinning icon, but it's only committed on the server side when the spinner is gone.
Wow.
So the optimistic update also works automatically for the same reason, right? The hooks understand what mutation is potentially impactful for a query in terms of optimistic update, right? So that when the mutation kicks off, we immediately identify the query cache and put the data inside of it. So you pretty much get a optimistic update UI for free without doing anything except for putting in a Boolean flag to opt in for it.
Incredible. So we have this end-to-end flow again using optimistic updates, and it just again works entirely out of the box. I love it.
Yeah. So I think that's pretty much for the demo part from my side. Unless Nicholas, you have other things of interest, we can talk more about it.
This was already pretty comprehensive, I think. So I personally learned a lot today, and I just love seeing how you build on top of ZenStack. Yes, in that sense, thank you for showing us around here.
Cool.
Before we wrap up, kind of what's next for ZenStack? What are your plans with it?
Yeah, great question. So I think one interesting, very interesting side effect that we didn't expect when we start to build ZenStack is that Prisma users started to ask for Prisma features from us. For example, we try to build a few things like, for example, the users want to organize schemas into multiple files, right? And
That's
import
one of
them
the
into
top most requested features, indeed, is support splitting the Prisma schema file.
Yeah. And then we thought that, since we already have our own DSL, we have everything under control. We just implemented the import syntax, but under the hood, still stitch everything into a full Prisma schema. So these are one of the areas I will be happy to continue being like a supplemental part of Prisma, make it a more awesome tool. There are larger this kind of a feature request in the scope. We're thinking about it. For example, the polymorphic association, like it probably can also be called like a generic foreign key, some kind of thing. Like you have a model where you have a one-to-many relationship to different types of assets, right? But you want to modify the permissions in a homogeneous way. We also think about this kind of stuff. So I think this is the one track of the future of of ZenStack. Yeah, so basically building a better Prisma. So that's definitely an area where we can collaborate. The other thing is that our midterm vision, we also thought about intrigued about the idea of using the schema to not only model first-party data in the database, but also third-party APIs. Because lots of times your database points to external stuff, like using a key to point to a ID of some artifacts in another system, right? For example, a payment record, etc. But these kind of things are also should be there should be a holistic view of your application. So first party, third party, and also they should be governed with the same set of like authorization policies, because that's how the application works, right? The user doesn't care if it's third party or fourth party; it needs to be secure.
Wow. So with that vision, the Prisma schema basically becomes an integration point for not only your database, but also for third-party systems. Maybe, and I'm just like now throwing some names, maybe like S3 could be connected to it, or even Stripe. Just like making sure that this is like a connecting layer where it then really sits between your database and your application, right? It's just one declarative way of kind of defining the main rules of your applications, the main assets, the main resources and entities, and putting them into a relationship, and then running ZenStack generate, and left and right falls out all the code that's needed to make that work.
Exactly.
Oh, I love it.
Yeah, now even longer term vision. I mean, following this track, I think we're still interested in trying out the idea of really becoming something like an open source bus. Like because we do data, we do APIs, it's kind of already integrating all the transactional part of the application. Maybe it makes sense to really extract it out as a service to add even more value. Yeah, but interesting, this kind of circle back to the initial thing that Prisma does in GraphQL.
Exactly,
days,
right? Yes. It reminds me a little bit of this, where you just define your models, and then what you get is a database and a GraphQL API and everything else. But you're now building it from the ground up. And I think in that sense, you're a lot better positioned than we were with GraphQL, because we kind of started at the top where, yes, there was a UI, where you had to define your models, and we were bound to GraphQL, and you're building everything from the ground up with the Prisma schema as the core primitive. So I think you have a lot of flexibility also in terms of which direction you want to take, and the flexibility that you can offer to your users. So that sounds great, and thank you so much for giving the summary and the demo here today.
Thank you, Nicholas. Enjoyed it.
All right, to wrap up, how can people get in touch with you and even contribute to ZenStack if they're interested in that?
Yeah.
So Jiasheng is the best person to handle this.
Yeah, I think it's just the general idea is just go to the GitHub, and you can create an issue there, or just join our Discord. And it's interesting. Just before this interview, I checked, we just surpassed 300 people in our Discord. I know it's
Wow.
a small number compared to Prisma, yeah, but that's really a big step for us.
That's a proper community already. And it sounds like, I mean, if like I'm putting myself in the shoes of a developer that joins a Discord for a community project like ZenStack, probably also means that I'm really engaged, that I'm not only in this Discord to just like kind of passively like lurk around, but I'm there because I have questions, I'm engaged, and I want to interact with the community. So I imagine the Discord to be fairly lively and with a lot of great conversations.
Yeah, exactly. We also have some Prisma members there. I think John is there, and also some former employer like Sabin is also there.
Sabin, yeah, of course.
Yeah. So if people ask some question, maybe you can also get answered by the Prisma team.
Yeah, of course. You can
There
take a look there.
Just overlapping with each other. I already mentioned.
Amazing. All right, Jiasheng, Yiming, thank you so much for joining us today, and hope to see you soon. Bye.
Thank you. Yeah, bye-bye.